afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all for coming. First of all, I want to make a big thank you to Ken for the slide presentation that he put together. This is another anachronism. Slides are now little, on the screen, not little 2-inch squares anymore. I want to tell you about the Pine Tree chapter, because they gave the organ to Medford. ATOS is the American Theatre Organ Society, and they have chapters all over the country. And the Pine Tree chapter came into existence in 1970. This is a copy of their charter, and they didn't actually have an organization at first, but they met under the stage at the State Theater in Portland, Maine. And it was a special theater, it was an atmospheric theater. I don't know if you can tell on the slide, but there are little balconies along the side, and every once in a while you look up and you see one that's a shawl over it, and it was just a great place to be until it fell into hard times. But they gave concerts there, and they maintained the organ, which is a 2-manual organ there. And the sad part of it is that the organ was, when it was raised, it was in a special place, and people were stepping on it to get to the stage from down below, and so there's been a big campaign to restore it. And the State Theater was actually restored and gotten back into a glorious condition, gilt and all, and they had a grand opening of the State Theater, and the Pine Tree chapter was all for it, and they helped out with it, and it was a special place. But they were able to find an organ that they could get, and the circumstances just kind of came together at the right time, as sometimes happens, and they found a 3-manual Wurlitzer that they could put in a middle school in Old Orchard Beach. So the whole thing shifted from Portland to the Old Orchard Beach, and the great thing was that there was a building being added on to this middle school, and it was going to be like, you know, the multi-purpose room that we're all familiar with, and it's going to be a cafeteria and an auditorium. And the architect who was building it was interested in the organ. So a wonderful thing, he designed 2 chambers right into the building, 2 chambers on each, one on each side of the stage, which had a curtain and everything for this organ. In the 60s, there was a push from RKO for their theater organs all over the country to be given away so that they wouldn't be trashed. And the members of the Pine Tree chapter learned about one of the RKO Proctor Theater in New Rochelle, New York. And they went there and checked it out in April '69, and eventually it came to Old Orchard Beach for a series of weekends. For a bunch of station wagons would go there and bring the parts to Old Orchard Beach. Another neat thing was that the town of Old Orchard Beach was pretty well off, and they paid for the installation to be done by professional people, so that Pine Tree chapters members didn't have to do that part, although they supervised it. And it started out with a 3-way agreement. The town owned the organ, the school housed the organ and permitted access to the organ, and the chapter maintained it and gave concerts, and also they gave demonstrations to the children of the school and the teachers. And so ever since then, that 3-way agreement has been renewed year by year. When I moved to Maine, I came from Southern California. Everybody said I wouldn't last one winter, but here it is. In '84, I moved to Maine, and I checked out the ATOS chapters that would be that I could go to, and there was one in Old Orchard Beach. So I started going to there, and long story short, I ended up being president, and I started a newsletter so that we could not only get people notified of meetings, but get more members. And there was a good, healthy membership for quite a while. And they had work parties. Usually they would come at 1 or 2 on Sunday afternoon, and then have the meeting at 3 and an open console. And it was a routine that was followed, and it was just super. And they were very busy because they took parts of the organ that needed restoration and taught the members of the chapter that didn't know how to do it, how to do it. We had wonderful work parties. Then we heard about an organ that we could have if we went to get it, and we jumped at the chance to place an organ. That would be a good thing for a chapter to do. It was originally installed in the RKO Key Theater in Dayton, Ohio, and in 1965, Dave Bowers was contacted about it because the theater was about to be torn down. He paid $4,000 and put the organ in storage, and when he took the organ out, it was quite a revelation for the people that worked there. They helped him, they got the console out and into his vehicle that he had for it, and said, okay, thanks for buying our organ. And he said, wait a minute, that's not all the organ, just this piece of thing with keyboards. So they looked around, and they finally found the pipes. They're way up high, and you had to go up a catwalk to get to them. But he persevered and got the whole thing eventually. Dave Bowers is a major figure in the field of automatic musical instruments. He's an author, and he's written a lot of books, and not just about mechanical music, but this one is called the Encyclopedia of Automatic Musical Instruments. And everybody that has reproducing pianos, music boxes, or band organs, and so on, they have this book, and it's been revised several times, but it's like the Bible, you know, or a huge reference book, and we just call it the Encyclopedia. And everybody says, what's that? Oh, look it up in the Encyclopedia. And it's a wonderful reference book, and the work that he put into that is enormous, but he did other books as well. And he's quite a person still in the field, still writing, and still acquainted with also the Musical Box Society. The Automatic Musical Instrument Collectors Association, called AMICA, is the main one for this sort of thing, and I have automatic musical instruments in my home, so I keep knowing what Dave Bowers is up to. Well, once he had to put it in storage, because you don't just say, well, here I am today and tomorrow you're going to have this organ. So he put it in storage, and then I don't know if he gave it to Neil White and Roy Haining, but they became the owners. And they built this building, which is fantastic. It's huge, and one whole side has pipes. And the console is on a mezzanine on the other side. And the organist can play along, and the music came out, and I had a chance to go and play the organ before they disconnected it, and it was a beautiful sound, and so I knew whoever got it was going to get a very nice organ. Roy and Neil had band organs, they had self-playing violins, they had an orchestrion, and down below, you know, if you were in the mezzanine, you look down on this array all around, and so the building was built for their collection and for the organ. But in 1986, they had to move. They had a business, and they sold the building, the property, and the business. And Dave Bowers bought the organ from them. And so he said, I'll buy this and I'll sell the organ. So he gave it a try, and he was going to sell the organ because he wanted it to be, you know, put to use. Well, he didn't find a buyer, and he wrote me a letter, and I forget what the subject of the letter was, but just as an aside in the letter, he mentioned about the organ and that it might be donated to the Pine Tree chapter. He was aware of the chapter. So the members considered the project, and they decided to accept the organ, and the Pine Tree chapter members assessed themselves $50 each. Everybody chucked in $50 because there was going to be some expense. The organ was in Ohio, and so they would have to get it, and that would take some money. There was a nice thing that an organ technician in a neighboring town neighboring to Portland had a lot of pipe trays. They're about as long as that screen over there, and it helps the pipes to have them in a tray lined up and taped down. And so we got, I think, six or eight, and we shipped them to Ohio. And I was shipped off to Ohio in a plane, and off I went. There was another fortunate thing there because there was a couple who were members of Amica, and when you're in these big organizations, they have a chapter, they have a convention every year, and even though you don't live by somebody, you get to know them just like a friend, seeing them in these conventions every year. And at one time I was publisher of the bulletin of the organization, and Liz Barnhart was treasurer, so we had a lot to do with each other. Well, they lived in Dayton, Mike and Liz Barnhart, and that's how I happened to know them, and I could stay with them, so that was very convenient. And they proved to be the reason, I think, that the organ is here. I mean, without them, there are lots of spots along the way when you could say that, I guess, but in this case, the football team was going to come, uninstall the organ, pack it up, but no, there was a senior prom, and that wiped out the weekend for them. So Mike and Liz, and two friends who were also members of AMICA, Automatic Musical Instrument Collectors Association, helped out. Roy and Neil were there, but they were not able to do a lot of heavy work. So Mike and Liz and their son John and their son Doug, I'm sorry, and with two friends who were also members of AMICA, removed this organ, and I had a chance, as I said, to play it before they disconnected it, but I helped a little bit. I taped down pipes and that sort of thing, but I arrived there on Friday, and all day Saturday and all day Sunday until I left Sunday evening. That's what it took to take out that organ, and that's something that just is unheard of, that you could uninstall an organ like that. Anyway, it was done over the weekend, and off I went back to Maine, driving a Ryder truck that we had rented, and it was we had requested a 22-foot truck, but they gave us a 24-foot truck, and it was great because they just were able to shut their door, just barely. And so I stayed near Columbus, Ohio. And if you have a 24-foot truck, you can't just, waltz in and say, I want a room. You have to figure out what you're going to do with that truck. Anyway, I got through that, and also I had to stay overnight in Newburgh, Pennsylvania. When I got to Maine, the Pine Tree chapters were very proud. They had this wonderful organ, and they were going to be searching for a place to have it installed. But what they had to do right then was to put it in the basement of my Cape Elizabeth home, and so Cape Elizabeth was the home number one. You'll see why I'm saying that. home number one for this, what we began to call the Bowers organ. Well, we followed up a lead about a site that where we could place it in Gardner, Maine. It's called Johnson Hall, and it seemed like a very good place because they had performing arts going on all the time. They gave classes and ballet and acting, and they had a football team that would come and get the organ out of the basement. This time it worked. They came, took it up to Johnson Hall, and people from the Pine Tree chapter were there. And we had quite a challenging effort when we got there. The place had been flooded, and there were plenty of rooms because they had to, I guess, do some work after the flood. But the hardwood floors were wavy from this water experience, and you literally had to climb up and down, and you were carrying parts of the organ, and so it was quite an experience. It was going to be just great, and this was home number 2 for the organ from Ohio. We were very excited because we knew that the organ would be used regularly, but something happened. They got a new governing board, and they weren't interested in the organ like the old original governing board that we worked with. And so I had moved to Gorham in the meantime, so that we had to move the organ from Gardner, Maine to my basement in Gorham, Maine. This is home number 3, see? And we got pretty used to knowing what to do. But when I decided to retire in 1992 and buy a home in Medford, Maine, everything went well, but I bought a house, and it was in Medford, Maine. So here's home number 4. They got to move the organ, had a crew, they did their thing, and put it in the basement of my home in Medford. The console had to be located someplace else, but there was an organ company in town and a member of the Pine Tree chapter, and he had space to store the console, so that's what he did. Now, nobody would foresee that I had a good reason to move to Massachusetts, and that's a whole other story, but good reason. And that was in 1996. And fortunately, kind of another lucky thing happened. Marvin Horowitz was a member of all these organizations that I was a member of, and he had been in touch with the Chevalier group because he gave them a Mar and Colton organ that he had to take out of his house because he was moving to Florida. And that had been accomplished, but he was in touch with them, and he knew about this organ that was in my basement, and it was going to be a step up in quality from Amar and Colton. So the day before I moved out of the house in Medford, here came a crew from Medford, and I think they were mostly people from the Chevalier Commission, thank you. And they got a crew of about 5 people, and then the Pine Tree chapter members were there again, and loaded it up, and so here it came, and now it is in home number 5, and it's not going anywhere. I can tell you that. You're going to see why.
You got any room to solve?
Yeah. So I got settled in Billerica, Massachusetts, but I stayed a member of the Pine Tree chapter, and in 2003 I was still a member and getting out their newsletter. And in 2002, Michael and Teresa Cirillo contacted me about getting some people together as a support group for the organ. And they contacted me, and then a few months later they contacted me again, and they were pretty determined that there was going to be some people that were gonna know about and do something with that organ. Well, we gathered up a few names, and then some more names, and as time went along, we added more names, and pretty soon we had a mailing list. So we sent out a meeting, an announcement of a meeting about a support group for the organ. The list grew and grew, and soon everybody, not everybody, but many people who were interested in the organ, not people who could necessarily play it, but they loved to have them around. And we not only had a meeting, but we got organized right away. We got the officers, president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary, and we had people that volunteered to take these offices, and that was the birthplace of the Chevalier Theatre Organ Society. Now, there's another organ society station in Wellesley. It's the Eastern Massachusetts chapter of the Theatre Organ Society, and we say MCATOS. And they're local people, and they've been going for a long time. And they heard about this Chevalier Theatre Organ Society, and what's this, you know? And so they gave me a call, because I was a member of that also. And I reassured them that we only had one purpose, and that was to get this organ installed. So that was okay, and some of them have been maintained an interest in the organ. But at that point, it became known as the Chevalier organ, or the Chevalier Wurlitzer. There is now a package. It included an Ampico A reproducing piano and a set of tracker bars like that. And when they're connected, they will play the organ in a special way, as they did in Martha Horowitz's home. They will play by rolls. You put a roll in, and it's going to make the organ sound like a band organ, that sort of thing. Now, the piano and the tracker bar are part of the set that originally came, and this story of the Mar and Colton is a story in itself, but I'm going to let somebody else tell that story. And that's the story that I can tell from about the beginning.